you've always worked for someone and you're now jumping into entrepreneurship, it is night and day on, having to be, you're told what to do, you know what to do, you do it well, and then you get to be the creator of what you do and how you do it and how well. So
welcome back, friends, to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. This is your host, Sherry Miter. And today I am joined by Regina Sloan. And I know this is going to be such a powerful conversation because we had a conversation a month ago. It was actually, and the only reason I know this is it's in my notebook, but the date was on April 25th, Regina. So it was pretty much almost exactly a month ago. And it was just, I took copious notes just from our conversation and all the things you do and your heart and your soul and how you've got to where you are. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation with you here today. So welcome to the podcast, Regina.
Thank you, Sherry. I'm really excited to be here. A little nervous, but thanks for having me on. I also enjoyed our conversation. I felt like we kind of just ebbed and flowed off of each other and things just kept coming up, and it was supposed to be an intro call and it ended up being this really powerful conversation. So yes. I do remember that.
Yes, I know. I think it was one of those calls. I was like, dang it, I should have just hit record on that. It was so good.
Yeah. Yes.
It was so good. Well, I have no doubt that today will be just as good of a conversation, if not even more powerful and better as you can share your story. So speaking of that, why don't you let the listeners know a little bit about who you are today, Regina, and then we'll go backwards on how you got here, but tell them all the things that you do today.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm Regina Sloan. As Sherry's already said, I've got a lot going on, or at least it sounds like a lot. I've gotten used to it, but I'm a wife. My husband travels a lot for his work. And so I spend a lot of time with my kids alone with what he has to do. I have 4 children. They're 2, 5, want to be 13 in a few days, and then 17. And I've been a nurse for the last 10 years. I still do work full time doing that. I really enjoy it. And lots of skills in what I do on a daily basis has a lot to do with what I have started building the last couple of years. And that's my life coaching business. So I help people, create the life they want by honing in on their own inner knowing and just kind of starting their own journey and kind of letting go of what they've been told is okay or not okay or what's for them. And then my husband and I we have a real estate investing business where we flip homes, which is fun and a headache some other times. And then I have a podcast as well where I talk about personal development for moms and just really creating your own, I guess, definition, if you will, of motherhood. And the most powerful part of that podcast for me is the conversations that will be had around motherhood and what that looks like for everyone and those not so fun things that, we tend to not talk about or not think it's appropriate to talk about. So we have some fun on there in that arena.
Right. And what's the name of your podcast again?
It's Moms Who Achieve.
Moms Who Achieve, and definitely listen, especially if you love mindset things, which I do. And Regina's got some great information on there. So definitely check out her podcast. So you definitely are out there doing all the things. And that's one of the areas I want to kind of make sure we go to today in our conversation, Regina, is because a lot of times I hear from some of my clients or people who are prospective clients that when they're trying to figure out their calling, they think they have to give up what they're doing currently, which is not their calling, in order to start pursuing their calling. And I love that you still have your hand in the nursing. So talk a little bit about why you're still doing that. I mean, most of the time that's a practical, concept. But I'm just curious, like what keeps you there? And what is your plan for the future?
Yeah, so I became a nurse. I made the decision very young to be a nurse. I think it actually was kind of instilled in my mind. I remember when I was young and my grandma would say, oh, you're going to be a nurse. You're going to be a nurse. And that really just became my self-belief, honestly. And I talk about that kind of thing on the podcast as well of like how what we say to our children and what we, tell them about themselves and the world when they're young really becomes their belief system. So that was my thing as long as I can remember. And the essence of it is I do love to help people. But in healthcare, especially when you're doing healthcare a certain way, you can only help in that area. There's so many different ways that you can help people. So I have thought about that in the last 5 or so years, just like, is there more, the questions that come up when you start doing the same thing every day and not really satisfied with that. I work 3 nights a week, so I have, all kinds of time. And so at some point, I wouldn't say there was a big aha moment, but at some point I started to just think about what I wanted for the future. And part of that is time freedom and really being able to make more money in less time. Whereas if I'm working for someone, I'll typically be paid, hourly and or salary. And so I decided I wanted to jump in some different things, and I've tried different types of coaching and didn't really fit well. And so I've kind of honed in, and I didn't just wake up one morning and decide I want to do something and that was just it. And I still feel it to still be a journey, especially if you've always worked for someone and you're now jumping into entrepreneurship. It is night and day on, having to be, you're told what to do, what to do, you do it well, and then you get to be the creator of what you do and how you do it and how well. So to answer the question about why I'm still a nurse, part of it is income because I want to be at a certain financial level before I let go of that. But also because I do understand in my own mindset work that money, I can create money and it comes and I can quit today and be fine. My nursing career is very much a big part of me. And so operating in letting go of something I've always done and jumping into something new is partly a journey of what I have to work through myself. But then it's very powerful still working as a nurse because I have so much interaction with people who are at their lowest. And before I decided I wanted to be a life coach, one thing I noticed was that most people that come in, if not all, they may obviously have a health condition of why they came in, but there was always something else. There was always something with their mindset that I get to work with people every day about, with my coworkers, with my patients. It seems to be the underlying thing for everyone. So I'm getting paid as a nurse, but I'm also very much practicing my life coaching at work. So
I love so much of what you just shared, Regina. And I want to see if I can go back and unpack some of those things because one, I love that you're staying a nurse, for the financial reason. Yes, we can hear that, we can create the income, but that puts a lot of pressure. And one thing I know for sure as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my entire adult life. And I know for sure that when you have to create income, that changes how we approach it. And it puts this, energy out there that's not always as positive as when we get to.
Absolutely.
And so
I agree.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's so smart for you and for anybody listening that don't rush it. You will know. It's almost like one day you will just wake up and you'll know it's time. You're ready.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that too. It's funny you say that. Mm-hmm. And I do want to agree with you too, because it took a lot of work and it's a continued work to say, I really don't have to work. I can just quit and I'll make ends meet and we'll figure it out. Like we always do. Everybody figures things out, right? But why do that if you don't have to? Especially like I don't dread going to work at all. Like a lot of my nurse friends think I'm crazy actually, because you don't usually become a nurse and then leave and do something else. Like you're like, oh, what's going on? What's wrong? There's nothing wrong. I really enjoy what I do there, but I want to do something else.
Right. And that's another big piece to it is that's still filling your cup. Like you said, it's still a part of who you are. So why walk away from that? And, again, it goes back, you'll know when it's the right time because it's no longer serving you well.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm. So, and I love too that you said that you actually get to practice your life coaching with other people. So that's an added bonus for you.
Yes, everyone has something, that
Oh,
their mindset they have something they're struggling with. So the conversation always comes up. And especially when you have people that aren't feeling so well, they're stuck in the bed. So they're thinking about things that they may have not had time to think about before. So I definitely get my skills in both ways for sure.
mhm. Yeah. So it's such a great example of you can do both. You can do both. It may seem
Yes.
crazy for a while, but again, you'll know when it's time. I feel like there's a space, and I kind of did the same thing. I was in direct sales as a leader, and I stayed for a year because I
Yeah.
wasn't ready, one, financially, and two, I just mentally wasn't ready. There was still stuff I had left to do. Like I knew I wasn't done yet in that position, but
Yeah.
I started building this
Yeah.
other thing on the side. So I think it's such a smart way
Yeah.
to look at it.
I think I'm glad you brought that up because I do get a sense of when I'm talking to people and or listening to people around that. I don't know where it comes from or why. It's just a feeling I get like there's something negative about, working, getting paid hourly while also building something as if it's not as serious because you're doing it that way.
Mhm.
But I think everyone has to look at their own personal situation. I have 4 children. We have a family. We're doing all kinds of things, not just building, this. And if you don't have to, why? Like why stress about it? Just like it feels good to right now be able to build because I want to and be able to build how I want, take my time, whatever that looks like, versus okay, mortgage is due. I need this much now. What can I do to create that?
Right, right. I have to go get a client, I think that's such a horrible
Yes.
place to be. Yes.
Yes, that
Uh,
energy. Absolutely.
and I also remember I'm just having this flashback when my kids were little. They're grown with their own kids now. But I remember when they were in preschool and I had 3 boys, like boom, boom, boom. And
Mm.
the youngest the oldest two were in elementary school and the youngest would be in preschool. And I had like 2.5 hours, 3 days a week. And let me tell you, I used to get so much stuff done in that 2.5 hours. And I remember thinking, oh, when he goes to kindergarten, I'm going to get so much. And I wasted the day away. And I still do today. Sometimes if you have
Mm.
too much time, you can waste it.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, that is so true.
yeah. So I think, again, that's a reason why don't rush it. Like, you learn to, what is that? The theory of time or time expand or no.
The Einstein time. I know Einstein time is the way they also talk about it.
Yeah. What is that?
Just about that the amount of things we're going to do or amount of time it takes to do something expands with the amount of time we have.
Right. Right. It's like the
Yeah.
analogy of somebody calls, normally it may take you all day well, I like a packing analogy I'm going to use actually instead of cleaning, but a packing analogy,
Yeah.
like it can take me a week to pack for a vacation because I put it off. I hate packing, stresses me out. But if somebody called me up and said, oh my gosh, I just won 2 tickets to Paris, but we have to leave in an hour. Let me tell you, I could pack a suitcase in 15 minutes.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And that's so true. So when you do have less time, I actually can attest you're right. I get so much more done when I know, okay, I have this much time, which is kind of how I have to operate now. I get up early before my kids do. And I have about an hour and a half. What am I going to do? And then nap time. Sometimes we go to the YMCA and they get to play with their friends. I'm like, okay, I have an hour and a half. Like you just do what you have to do, but I do get more done that way.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to waste it because you have to get things
Absolutely
done.
not.
You have big goals.
Yes, yes.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about when you and I had talked before, you mentioned something that you had to overcome the poverty mindset of being an entrepreneur, but also that you were the first first in a generation to do a lot of things. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
more about that, Regina.
Yeah, so I know most people, maybe that's a technical term of the poverty mindset, has a lot to do with money. For me, it is in so many avenues. It's more about, yes, money, but also just scarcity thinking and this bar that can be very low depending upon how you grew up. And so for me, beautiful family, and I am an advocate for, we do what we can with the tools we have. So I keep that in mind. But in my family, I am the first generation to do lots of things, including, college. And even how I raise my children is very different from my family. I've taken on conscious parenting fully, and that's not how I was raised, and not even how I raised my first two when they were younger. So born into a situation or a family where, the bar was very low of what people did and how we got about and what we can create in the world. I didn't really have any high expectations of myself. So even going and finish high school is a huge deal, right? So when you're thinking of doing something beyond that, it's just not in your periphery to really think about when those things aren't. I mean, you got people who are living, trying to survive and trying to make ends meet, and they're working a lot. People aren't, especially when I was younger. I feel like my generation, we're doing better, but these kinds of conversations weren't had, with your children for the most part about who you can be and how you can do that, and really pushing that bar and building up the thoughts in a child's mind that they can do whatever, however they want. So even something simple as being nurtured to always work for someone was in my family. It wasn't really talked about that, hey, we can create our own businesses and do what we want, and you can do something that you've not even seen before. And that's because they weren't told that, right? So having to overcome that, having to, when you grow up hearing things like money doesn't grow on trees and you don't have enough and we can't do this because we don't have the money and there's never enough and all that, like that becomes your belief system. So as an adult, when I got out and I operated in that same mindset, like I got myself in a lot of financial trouble and learned very quickly that, I wouldn't be able to get ahead with poor credit and poor money habits and, hearing and seeing. I know social media, a lot of people don't really care for it, but seeing that technology allows you to see what's possible now and what people are doing. And so as a young adult, when I'm learning that, it just really opened my mind to a lot of not only what I was taught or not taught, but what I was teaching and not teaching my kids about possibility. And so when I decided that I wanted to get my finances together, I was hit with all of the, money habits I had learned, spending habits I had learned, thoughts about money that tend to get in the way, and they didn't progress me forward. So I had to challenge myself on that and really create new thoughts for myself that were very uncomfortable at first. And the same for even jumping out into entrepreneurship. My family, it is amazing and awesome if you go to college and you get a job and that's that. You stay there till you retire. So when I started toying with the idea of, well, I don't really have to build this retirement account or put all my money at it because I don't plan on retiring as a nurse. I plan on working for myself and having lots of money, and retirement just looks differently in that way, where I don't wait until I'm 67 or whatever the age is to get a paycheck. That was very uncomfortable. And talking to people that I've grown up with or people in my family, it's actually crazy. And so having to surround myself with new thought processes and new people and people who thought like that was very powerful for me. So I'd say, I don't know that I would say I've actually like superseded and got through it, because I'm still hit with those old thought patterns often. And I have to take a moment and think of the thoughts that I created for myself to push me forward. So it's an everyday process, especially when you're raising kids. So you have to make sure that, you're creating that thought process for them as well. But it shows up a lot in entrepreneurship because, again, I have to create my own standard, my own standard of operations and things like that. Whereas when I'm working for someone or being raised, you just go to work, you do what they say, and you retire, and all is well.
Right. Which I think is the mindset a lot of us, or a lot of people, were brought up in, that, again, you've made it if you get that college degree and then you go get the job. And there's no real thought to the fact that you may be a few years into your career and realize this is not how I want to live. This is not fulfilling my cup. This is not what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then to think about, well, now stepping into entrepreneurship is such a foreign thought for so many people because, again, their family, that's what they did. And it didn't matter whether or not you enjoyed the job, right? Just like you have a good job, you get paid well. Why would you walk away from that? You get a good retirement. Like I hear that all the time. And one of the things
go ahead. I was just, when you said good retirement, like the job that I had left to do contract work it was your retirement gig. So yeah, I got that for sure. And I don't think much is like, if people decide they want to do that, that's great, but we're just living a era where you don't have to. You can, you can just really do anything now.
Yes, absolutely. And changing that mindset. I just did a podcast a few weeks ago and I talked about this crease. I took a piece of paper and just fold it in half. And like, that's the crease. That's the mindset, the thoughts that we've grown up with and we've heard over and over and over again. So they are deep in our brain because we've heard them so much. That again, a good job, if you have the security, which that was thrown out the window even before COVID, that we realized there are no secure jobs, right? Or that retirement or health benefits and all these things. But like you just said, I mean, there's so many possibilities today. So it's creating a new crease. I say just flip the paper, create a new crease. Get the new job.
Yeah, which can be really hard. But I agree with you. Mindset is like 100%. And it's just really realizing that you can do no more than what you think. And so kind of really thinking about, what do you want? How are you going to get it? Can you believe you can do it? What things can you tell yourself as you're working towards it? It's all about your own thoughts. And so I had to kind of really separate myself from the thoughts that I grew up with and just create new ones. And by way of seeing, at first, it's kind of like, who else is doing it? What's possible? When you're reaching out and doing some new stuff, and then realizing that all of it, and I didn't teach myself this, I'm like learning from lots of people, Joe Dispenza, Bob Proctor, all kinds of like people that have shared their story and or continue to help us to see that for ourselves. But I just make sure that I surround myself with people of that mindset so that mine continues to grow that way.
Yeah, so important. I was going to ask you, how did you break from that mindset originally that you were brought up in? And again, we're not bashing anybody. Like, it's like,
sure,
everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm sure my kids could do a year's worth of podcasts and all the mistakes I've made as a parent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But breaking free from it, for me, yeah, you're right. It stays there. It's something that's very familiar, and maybe in 20 years or something, maybe it won't be, but it's very familiar. But I think making it logical, like if you're looking at your situation or the thoughts that you used to believe or the thoughts that you're trying to change now, really just thinking of it in a logical way of like, where did those thoughts come from? And that makes sense. And where am I trying to go, and do those thoughts, will they serve me? Maybe it's every belief we have is just a thought that we, choose to believe. So what thought am I having or can I create for myself to help me move forward? And sometimes I'm like grasping at straws, right? Because I'm trying to create this myself, oftentimes alone. But that's when you pull in your resources and take a moment also just to kind of be at peace. I really try to spend a lot of time alone about what is it that I want and visualizing my future for myself and not, again, grasping onto something else that someone else told me I should do.
Mm. So where did you learn all that initially? Do you remember, where did it start from?
Yeah, so I have always been a reader. I've always been a deep thinker. And I think that caused me to run into different things. So I've never really watched much TV and things like that, but I'm reading a book or I'm listening to a podcast and, you just get so much information from there. And I feel this really became serious when I heard about Bob Proctor. I think maybe one of his videos maybe flashed across on YouTube. And I was just like, whoa, like, what do you mean? We get to decide our thoughts. What do you mean? Every thought that comes in, I don't have to agree with, or I can decide to change one. It was just mind blown for me. So I actually did a lot of his seminars that he has done in the past. I probably have watched every video he has, and repetition is really how you learn. So a lot of the things that I would listen to and still today, I continue to like learn and relearn and listen to over and over, because when you listen to something once, it's different when you listen to it a second or third time, because you're a different person. So Bob Proctor, Joe Dispenza, who else would I say? There's so many. I mean, if you just look them up, you'll probably get some other ones. Some of my favorite first book, I think, on this kind of thing is Think and Grow Rich. It can be a hard read at first, but I've read it a couple of times. And I love that book because it does just that. It helps us to assess where our current thoughts are and kind of really make sense of where we are, and then be able to kind of creep into the possibilities of the future and help us to see how do you create that for yourself and how do you stick with it as well.
Right. Yeah. Great recommendations. Great recommendations. And it's so important that we can create that new mindset, but we do have to plug into a new way of thinking. We can't do it alone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I'm not sure that I would have ever done that alone, you know, in my environment, because that's all, you know, it's all I'm submerged in. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To break free, it was, you know, they say we become like the 5 people we hang around. And if everybody's in that same mindset, whether it's family, friends, coworkers, it's very hard to break free. And that's why it's so important to put yourself, even if it is virtually. There's a lot of people that I follow, they have no idea that they mentored me. But
yeah, absolutely. Yes. And then, you know, when you're first hearing something for the first time, it can be foreign and I don't agree with that, or no way. But when you really come with an open mind and you are trying to understand something, I truly believe the universe brings all of what you need to you. And so just keep at it. And before you know it, it'll be your new way of thinking.
Absolutely. Great advice. And I love that what you just said too about the universe will bring us what we need, and we just have to ask for it. And now There may not bring you $1 million. It doesn't work that way. but if you're looking for a coach, or you're looking for a money mentor, you're looking for something, you know, just keep asking for it. I would pray for it, you know, and it's amazing how when we open and expand our brain, we start to see what's already there. It's there.
Yeah.
We're just not seeing it because we haven't spoken. It's kind of like Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook does that today. If you just say that you're looking for a new vacuum cleaner, you're going to see ads for
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes to asking or looking, like, even in prayer and all of that, I truly believe in being in the presence of it already happening, and almost just gratitude for what already is to come, you know.
Expand on that a little bit, Regina. What does that look like?
Yeah. So in the work that I've been doing in actually, this is work I'm studying with Joe Dispenza and learning, and that our mind only knows the present oftentimes, and it goes a lot deeper. But when we are constantly in a space of, oh, I can't wait until, or when that happens, our current thoughts is that it's over there. And so that's how it will always be. But when you think about it, so if someone's like, I want to have all my debt paid off, when you think about that deeper and you ask the questions, well, if all of my debt was paid off right now, how would I be? Who would I be? How would I speak to people? How would I think about money? You know, how would I spend my time? What would I do in my alone time? And just really embody that person. Like the more I think it's Jim Rohn, or I might be saying his name wrong. I might have the totally different person, but there was a quote like, you don't become who you want, you become who you are. And it's just like, whoever you want to be, try to be that person right now, like every day, walk in that, and that becomes who you are.
Such great advice. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, of the fact that you are still a nurse, but you're also a life coach. And you're being happy in both of them, versus that person that, and, you know, I see this and I've coached them of the people that like, oh, I hate my job. And that just gives that, again, it goes back to that bad energy. So how, kind of the same thing with the money, like if you could change that mindset, what you just said about like, how would you live if you were in your true calling? How would you show up each day?
Yeah, yeah, because that's all you ever are is who you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us do waste time and our thoughts on, oh, and this and when that, and it's never better over there, than it is here. It's just different problems, maybe on a bigger scale. But I did have to learn that in my nursing when I first decided I'm going to do something else. You do kind of get like, oh, well, not that this is beneath me, but like, oh, this will just be temporary. And I had to really decide, like, wow, hold on, I'm a life coach and I show up for people, but I'm half assing the job. Like, what
Mm.
kind of life coach is that? And I had to really like think of who am the best person that I can be doesn't just show up as a life coach or show up at home or show up, when things are going well. This is the person I am all the time, whether I'm as a nurse, a life coach, a mom, at the grocery store, it doesn't matter. So I really try to embody, the energy of who I am.
I love that so much. Yeah, that's great advice. So if you're listening
Yeah.
to this and you take one thing away, I think what Regina just shared is so powerful. If you can just show up and embody who you want to be, no matter what role you're playing at that given moment, because we all play a lot of roles in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you decide to become a life coach?
So I myself have had to overcome a lot in my life, and push through. And I think most people have. You talk to most people in their 30s, at least they have had a story. They got some kind of story, and so that's not really new. But I also have been able to look at those situations and assess them and find how many of those, if not all, have kind of molded me into the person I am today. So I think that when I'm talking to clients or even people out about their past and things, that oftentimes people are living in that and they aren't really creating the life they want. A lot of people live life just as it comes instead of with intention. And most of that comes from, I believe, just a lack of education we get, as kids in school. And this is just not something that we're taught, that we really get to create what we want to be and what we want to do. And as a nurse, I can practice those skills for sure, but everything is heavily on the health part of the person. Of course, it's also a job. So I have, several patients, and I don't get to really do life coaching at work by itself. I have a job that I'm doing. So with nursing, I can help people in the health aspect, and that's just not my calling. I personally, in my mind, I believe that our minds are the most important thing, because if you can get your mind together and if you can create the thoughts you want and you can create the beliefs that will have you eating healthy or have you taking care of yourself, I mean, everything stems from our thoughts. And so when I thought of how I can do the most good for the most people, it would be to help people to identify and assess their own thinking. Because another part of that is I truly believe that once we understand how we treat children and we learn to treat them as human beings and not as property and all kinds of things that we're taught to do in this country, then we really change the world, because every adult that's struggling, or anyone in power or in any level, can talk about some things that have happened in childhood or how they were treated, or everything stems from, our childhood and what we were nurtured to believe was true. And so if we can treat children as human beings and we can treat them equally, and teach them the things that we're out here talking about as young children, it becomes like second nature for them. And you don't have to wait to 30s or 40s or even beyond to get it together. So to answer it clearly, I think that our minds are the most important things that we have. And so I want to help people identify what it is they want to choose on purpose for their life.
I like that. And I would imagine my husband's he just retired from being a battalion chief on the fire department, but he still does some EMS stuff. And, we talk, and my daughter-in-law is a doctor. So we talk a lot about, there's always talk about, I'm not in the health world, but that's, in our family.
Yeah.
And I am in the mindset world more like you. But I bet you see firsthand that correlation of how the mind makes us sick.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. All the time, all the time. You have, and people think it's age. And of course, age has some hindrance, but we've got, 95-year-olds that, walk a mile every day or even more, and they happen to fall. And so that's why they're here. But those kinds of people always have a positive mindset. They always are grateful. They're kind. They have a story like the rest of us. And then you might see someone in their 20s or 30s that have lots of medical issues going on, but oftentimes those people have been through a lot, maybe haven't processed that. They also don't practice any healthy habits usually. Mm-hmm. So I do believe, although our healthcare system for sure needs lots of work in at being preventative, and not reactive, I do believe that if we all were able to grow up in a world or even learn early on the power of our minds and also what it means to be healthy and not just physically, I do believe we'd see such different story in healthcare for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the positivity, the positive mindset of just how we look at life. And, I'm just thinking one of my daughter-in-law's grandmother just passed away, and they just celebrated her 90th birthday.
Yeah.
And as sad as the loss is, I can't help but think isn't that how we all want to go, to have the family all was there to celebrate her life really while she was still alive. Pretty much 2 weeks previous to her passing. But she was such a spitfire, just so full of life. And yes, her body was physically breaking down, but mentally she was just fun and, a little crazy in a fun way. And just so much, just you love to be in her space. I feel honored that we got to know her. And then I look at some other people who, whether they be 40, 50, 60, 70, that it's so toxic to be in there. And, they're the ones taking all the pills or taking all the, having the health issues. And just our mind and how we look at life and how we treat life and how we treat others just makes such a difference. Yeah.
And the science, we have science now to prove that the mind-body connection, and they're very much in line. And so we have trauma and things that we don't process, they become disease. So there's lots of things out there about that for sure. But I definitely know what you mean. I can just in my years of work can pick up on, the different types of people in just a few moments. So from my experience, I 100% agree that definitely has a correlation for sure.
Yeah. Not to say that, again, I've also met many vibrant people who, my own mother passed away very young from cancer at, 57. She was very vibrant and positive, but sometimes the bad health sneaks in there. But even her process of dealing with that was, very positive and worried about, always taking care of everybody else. So it is just the mind just is baffling. It really is. It's so interesting to me how much it does affect so much of what we do, how we show up, our bodies.
And how we and I wonder and I just sometimes wonder how much people who are, they don't have the growth mindset or the fixed mindset or victim mindset and things like that. How much of those people, I have not done the research or even read up on it. I just wonder how much of those people, how much they know, I guess, about how powerful our thoughts are. So when I am talking to people about that, and they tend to be those kinds of people, when I am talking to them, it's very foreign to them. It's very foreign. So
Definitely. They haven't changed the crease in their paper, in their brain.
Yeah. And I think that it's one of those things, if you don't know, if you don't know, you don't know. So if these kinds of conversations become like everyday conversations, even from very little kids, very small, it just becomes a norm like other things.
Right. And I love the image. And you alluded to this earlier too, Regina, that I think you and I both got this mindset stuff later in life. It sounds like we weren't, it wasn't the way. And my parents were my mother was very positive, and my dad was an entrepreneur after he retired from the military. So I had that, but I didn't get into the whole mindset things and following different people until I was into my 20s. But then I was able to pass that on to our kids. And I see that again, not that there hasn't been trouble, not that there hasn't been issues. It's not perfect. I'm not saying that at all, but I see how now they approach life and they're willing to try things. They've all tried and failed, and they got back up and tried again until they found their thing. And, I just can't help but imagine, like, what would the world look like 20 years from now if people like you and I, people listening to this, people raising their kids in this more positive mindset and teaching them that your mind can control so much on how we experience the world. Like, what would that next generation look like?
Oh, man. It would be endless. And tag on that, failure is part of life. I think that we, from early on, from schools and even how we raise our children, teach kids that failure is not good. Doing something wrong is not good. And so a lot of us, I talk to a lot of people who would love to have their own business, but it all leads to fear of rejection, fear of failure, sometimes fear of success. And so when we think of that, like if that was the thought process that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to fail. How many times can I fail, this year to get closer to what it is I'm supposed to do? Then people would definitely go out on a whim and try more things for themselves.
Right. I can't remember who it was. May have been Darren. I don't think it was Darren Hardy. I don't know. Somebody I followed too that or had followed in the past. I remember him talking about his dad at the dinner table. I think there were 3 kids, and one of the things they had to share was what they failed at that day.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that was how they were raised, that if you're not failing at something, you're living too much in your comfort zone and your safety zone.
Exactly. You're not pushing yourself. Yes. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So we could do a whole nother podcast on fears and failure, fear of failure, fear of success. Seriously. Totally. That's a whole nother one. But our time here is coming to an end. So any advice, because this podcast is about finding your true calling, and just like you did with your life coaching and being able to combine your passion for mindsets with your wanting to help people like you do with as a nurse, I see how that led to that. But any advice for somebody that is listening and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I break from the, maybe that poverty mindset? How do I break free from, my own crease in my brain, the thoughts? How do I break free and have the courage to start something new? All those things that stay in our head. Any advice for them, Regina?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, just by thinking about my journey and other people that I've talked to, awareness is key. I think that if we make a decision in our minds that we want to change something, and we become aware of that, then we start being aware of the thoughts that we have that come across on a daily basis. We start being aware of the things we say, the places we go, the things we watch. And I would also say that nothing changes until you change. And so oftentimes when people if they're doing the same mundane things every day and they want to change something and they're not sure how, there are so many resources out there. Find you someone. You can even YouTube, positive mindsets, how to change a positive mindset. So really the question is, how much time are you spending on your growth each day? I really think that boils down to that, because I can give you 10 ways to do something, and Sherry, I'm sure you can give another 10 ways, and we can all, because none of our journey looks alike. But I will say that we are intentional with what we do with our time. And so whether that be, reading a book by someone that's talking about the mind and how we change it, our habits and goal setting and all of that, or watching that, or are you spending hours just browsing on Netflix and YouTube and, social media, which there's no judgment at all there, but it's we only have a certain amount of time, and what are you doing with it? So I think that that'd be the first thing I'd say, is that to carve out time each day for your own personal growth. I'd say to definitely have self-compassion. I don't see much being created when we are self-critical. We're compassionate and we create from abundance, things will come, and really just trusting where you are. I truly believe that where you are is where you should be. And the moment you decide you want to do something different, we can create that. But when we, as you had alluded to earlier, when you're operating like, oh, I got to do this, I need to do that, it can become very overwhelming. And so there's millions of resources out there, and that can be overwhelming as well. But just kind of set aside time to do some self-growth each day, and really kind of attach yourself onto something that you can really jive with, who you may listen to, I might not care for, and vice versa. But once you find something, even if it's 5-10 minutes a day, because it will grow exponentially, you will see the difference in the way that you think.
100% agree with everything you just shared, that being intentional and just start plugging into something, even if it is 5 to 10 minutes a day. One of the habits I created a long time ago, and it almost feels weird if I don't do that, is while I'm getting ready in the morning, in the bathroom, doing my skincare, putting on some makeup, I listen to something positive that's going to set the tone for the day. And like I said, that's a habit I created. That's a simple habit. Start there. And as a reminder, because your podcast does talk about mindset, it might be the perfect place to start. Remind the listeners what the name of your podcast is again.
Yeah, sure. It's Moms Who Achieve. It should be on every platform. So
yeah. And I'll put the link in the show notes. And if people want to connect with you or follow you, what's the best place to find you, Regina?
Sure. So I can be emailed at regina@momswhoachieve.com. Also, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Moms Who Achieve.
Excellent. And again, we will put that in the show notes. And follow, like, Regina's got some good stuff. So I love what you're putting out there. And I applaud you for everything you're doing. And holy cow, you got a lot going on with kids from little to teen. You got all the challenges happening, and the fact that you are achieving things. Just keep doing what you're doing, Regina. And you got a lot of great things to share with the world. So thank you for being
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.